Now, this is something that I would suggest is rarely done, but what about your own internal risk management practices? So these are people in the business who are managing the relationship. And so as you go through it, it's number one, can you actually implement change in an organized way so that the change management expertise that is required, is it resident in the business unit or can they get access to it? Because there's nothing worse than going through a major initiative and having it fail. And it's usually because either there's something wrong with the structure of the relationship, you didn't do your homework, or the right resources are not there. Because quite often when you outsource, they'll just pull the team off and expect things to happen. Business process metrics, do you have your own business process metrics to say whether or not you're performing, and how does this fit into your process metrics overall? So I'm seeing a big trend in terms of service level agreements as an internal service provider. And so what are your service level metrics, and are your suppliers in alignment? The management team this is really the contract manager. Have they ever had any training on how to manage their relationship? And that's actually not a terribly common thing. Have you put enough people on the transition team? Is there a relationship manager in place? This whole concept of line of sight performance accountability is, can you find a way to actually have the suppliers' incentives for their people match the incentives for your people? And it may not be identical, but there should be enough common ground there. Are you incented by the same things? So also the internal BCP and disaster recovery planning. If they should be doing that in their own organization. And how do you actually align your supplier relationships and make sure that if you've got mission critical suppliers, that they're part of your own business continuity planning? And this is particularly important, is what's your strategy if in fact there's an unexpected failure, they go out of business, they're bought by someone that you just can't work with. The SLAs should be synchronized. So if you have SLAs to your business, do your provider SLAs match that as well? Another one is, have you ever looked at, if they touch your customers, do you look at their scripts? Do you approve their scripts? Because you can either disaffect your customer service, or in fact they could accidentally break the law on your behalf, especially if they do something in terms of tied selling. They may not understand what your restrictions are. Have they documented their change processes and controls? Have you documented them? Because if you don't have access to documentation, you'll start to lose your knowledge of the processes and make it very hard to change suppliers, very hard to improve the performance overall. And do you assess your own internal controls? Most companies now, in fact, you're not just a buyer of services and a provider to customers. Quite often you'll find that you also sell certain services to other companies. And so I'm seeing more and more that there actually are SAS 70s on your own operations because you have other customers who are touching them as well. And the information security policy and controls, if you're not clear about what you expect and what you need, you will get what they're going to offer. So you have to have a very clear line of sight and view in terms of what you expect. So if you step back, basically what we've done so far is you've got basically a set of risk ratings for your service provider, and you've got a set of risk ratings for yourself. I would suggest you actually put ratings on them. So if you've gone through and you've assessed risk, let's say that you've rated your suppliers in terms of financial viability as a ABC or D. D is very low risk, out of sight or out of line of sight. You want to assess your contractual risk. You never get everything that you want, so are there things out there that are causing you concern? And so on and so forth. Their information security, how much risk are they presenting to you? So you have a set of risk assessments over here for your internal provider. I also would suggest that as you go through, you can actually create a tool that's not terribly difficult to complete. But for each of those relationships, I've also seen where there's a tool created so you can assess your own ability to manage and risk rate yourself. And then you put these two things together, right? So you've got your external risk, your internal risk, and now you actually have something that you can govern. Because if you're looking at that governance layer on top, whether it's in procurement, and I actually have had it in my own department, but I've also had it in compliance or in operational risk management or. Basically what you want to do is be able to put that governance layer on top. So if you've defined all the things that are to be risk rated, and you actually assign risk ratings to them, and you have a system to help you back it up. Then what you can do is apply a layer of corporate governance, and then you start to get some sense and sensibility, right? So all the low-risk stuff that just creates a lot of noise, you don't have to report that upward, right? At the end of the day, that's kind of business as usual. You're going to probably take a thin layer of higher risk or high-risk relationships that are either things you can manage down because you can change the way you're interacting with the supplier. You can get them to tighten up some things, or you can tighten up things. And that corporate governance layer can now start to recognize where are there issues, and you can start to have actually a way to quickly escalate, in fact, if there is a major problem that's just looming. And what you do with that governance layer is it starts to make it important, just not just to the line of business, but also to your C-suite. Because now you can go with sensible information to say, I understand our supplier network, I understand our third-party relationships, and we've now called out the ones that are the ones to watch. A, it's something that's deteriorating. B, it's something that at the end of the day there's a certain amount of risk, we just can't avoid it. Or C, we have some systemic issues in our own company that we've noticed. And over time, you can actually start to create a dashboard that has you going sort of a layer up and down in terms of what's happening with the risk, because the intent is to manage the supply chain risk down over time. But unless you build the component pieces and start to build it up, you can't ever give that governance layer. So even though you may report to your regulators, I have X number of outsourcing relationships or whatever it is you have to report to your COO, your CFO, your regulators, it still doesn't say, I now also can tell you that I have a very good handle on the risk. So where you've got escalating risk with suppliers, either something that came out through your internet monitoring, through your risk assessments, et cetera, now you can start to build mitigation or remediation, or even, sort of basically a disaster recovery plan if things are starting to go a certain direction. And that's where you really start to make a difference and start to talk to people at the C-suite level. Because you can go up with some very useful information to say, okay, so now you can tell our board of directors basically, here's our risk profile on the highest level risk, here's what we're doing, here's what the controls we have in place, and to provide an early warning signal if things are going to go wrong. And that is really, to me, that's when you start to be a strategic business partner, because you can help the organization manage at a much, much higher level.